The second really broad area that we should be thinking about for our data is, does the data really capture standards? And that means standards overall and standards in specific areas of learning. Clearly, we need something that's going to capture the overall learning. So is this a grade 1? Is it certificate 1? Is it introductory stage? Whatever it might be called. That's the big picture overarching learning. It's the basis for judging what overall standards are like, and again in an equivalent context in schools, it's the kind of thing that a school would say, how many of our children are level 4 in English? We can use that then for benchmarking both internally and externally, and it's the kind of information that the Arts Council is looking for in that question on the annual returns for the numbers of students who are at various NQF levels. Though it might be worth considering that that data is perhaps too broad for us to really use on a day-to-day basis to make big improvements. Clearly again, if your hub is generally using commercial graded exams, that's going to be fairly straightforward to capture. If you're using your own internal systems, first thing to be really clear about is the extent to which your data for each stage, certificate, whatever you call it, matches the equivalent of those commercial national examinations. Because without that confirmation, any benchmarking with external providers will be really hard to manage. So that will probably need some kind of moderation. You can start off in looking at the syllabus requirements, probably the technical requirements for each instrument, but broadly speaking, do the technical requirements of each stage or grade match? You can then be using it with staff to make sure that they're clear about that learning match, the standards match. So as a group of teachers, can we discuss what we think stage 1 might look like? It's stage 3, what does that look like? And does that match grade 1, grade 3 on national examinations? Finally, what you might be looking for is examples of work. Do we have some pupils' standards which demonstrate what grade 2 bassoon is? And are we able to match our local certificate, stage 2, and be sure that the quality of learning, the performance, the oral work, all that goes into it is comparable? We should also, of course, be looking to try and look at standards in what you might call subsets of learning. So is the work of our students comparable across their ensemble work as opposed compared with their solo performing? What about their oral work compared with their improvising or their ability to play scales? There's a strong parallel here with how schools will treat their data. I'm thinking particularly about GCSE music results. I can think of one particular school where, although their A-star to C results were fine, they were concerned they weren't actually getting the strongest results in the A-star A area. So to find out what was causing that, they had to go into their data, but they had to go into the subsets of standards. They had to look at the different marks for the performing, composing and listening components of the exam. And what they discovered was that the listening section of the exam was where their students were falling down. A year's development work later, improving the work of their students and making greater progress in that area of learning, the consequence was for the department, their GCSE results overall showed much stronger A-star and A results. So what they were able to do was to improve what appeared to be their overall standards by going deeper into the data, finding out the different subsets of learning and where the issues were, and then make a big change. Of course, the other thing that is interesting about that particular story is that the school were not just looking at the subsets of learning, but they were also looking at the subsets of standards, in this case the A-stars and A's. So for instrumental vocal tuition, the same thing applies for us. We might know how many students we've got at grade 5, but are they only all getting a pass? How many are getting merits, how many are getting distinctions, and do we need to be doing something about that? Similarly, the same kind of thinking from a school could apply across to a music hub. The school first raised the question of the music department, why are your students not getting the same number of A-stars and A's as the English department is getting, or the maths department? And I think it would be an interesting question for us to reflect on, what about our woodwind students? Are they making as much progress? Are they reaching the same standards as the string players or the brass players? Is there a difference? And is there a good reason why there is a difference? But it's that question again. That's why the data is so important. It gives us a question which says, this is what the data is telling us. Why is that? And what can we do with our staff in terms of their professional development to share the thinking and improve the standards that eventually all our young people will be able to reach. So here's a summary of the key questions we might be asking ourselves for data around the whole business of standards. First of all, clearly, what percentage of students are actually reaching any given grade or stage, whichever we call it? Do we know how different instruments are faring within that? So do we know the difference between how many students reach grade 2 on woodwind compared with string? In even refining that further, can we know how many children are reaching pass, merit, distinction, bronze, silver, gold? Again, it depends how you play that. And just go back to that idea about the learning. Do we know how well our students are developing their learning? What standards are they achieving in those different areas of our model of learning, whatever that model might be?